Are you a permanent makeup artist and you've heard wonderful things about Brovi ink, but you're super confused? You don't know which ink to buy, which line to buy, how it's going to react in the skin, what it's going to look like when it ages, and you don't know which ink is best for your technique. My name is Lauren Taylor and I'm the owner of Lauren Taylor Ink here in Washington State. I have been using Brovi for years. I've been using it so long. When I first started using it, they only had one line. Now they have 3 different lines. So let's walk through step by step which ink you should be using and why. I'm gonna make this video simple, so I will just cut to the chase in the beginning, and then if you wanna stick around for longer and hear more information, we'll hear that at the end of the video. Brovi now carries 3 different lines. The first line that they came out with was, I would consider an organic line. It's very strong, it goes into the skin super quickly, it has a very high retention rate, there is not a lot of fade out during the healing process, and as it ages, it cools a little bit. Then they came out with the Brovi Plus line. So the Brovi Plus line is technically designed for hair strokes, though you could use it for powder brows. It's a bit warmer. It has a tiny bit less retention rate during the healing process. And when it fades out a bit warmer. Then they came out with the Brovi One line. The Brovi One line is what they are calling their inorganic line. So it has much less carbon. This is going to go into the skin a little bit slower, but it's not going to cool significantly as it ages. There are pros and cons to each ink, and depending on what your client looks like, their goals, their skin type, their age, and the technique you're using, you'll likely want to carry all 3 lines. So if you stop the video now and you don't want to listen to anything else, the one tip that I have for you is that if you are doing a permanent makeup technique in which you are heavily saturating the skin, for example, microblading or a very heavy saturated powder brow, then you should only be using inorganic ink. If you are new and you don't have a lot of experience and or you wouldn't put your own work on your face quite yet, then you're still going to want to use inorganic ink. If you're experienced and you are doing something with light saturation where the skin isn't fully saturated, where you can see a little bit of skin behind your tattoo, then you can use a mainly organic ink if you want to. So if you're doing nano and it's an airier style of nano and you can see a little bit of skin behind that stroke, then if you'd like, you can use an organic ink. But if you're doing a nano hair stroke that looks very saturated, almost exactly like a microbladed hair stroke, then you are absolutely going to want to only use the inorganic ink, which would be the Brovi One line. The Brovi One line is what they're calling their inorganic ink, and the Brovi regular line and then the Brovi Plus line are going to be their mainly organic inks. So what if you offer powder brows, microblading, and you're offering an airier style of nano hair stroke? When should you pull what ink? As I just said earlier, if you're microblading or doing a really heavy powder brow that's very saturated, a striking brow, a bold brow, something that looks very heavily saturated and looks like makeup, then you're going to want to use an inorganic line. You'll be pulling from the Brovi One line. If you're doing something that is soft and airy and you can see a little bit of skin behind your work, then you can pull from either the regular line or the Plus line, or you can do what I do. I mix the Brovi regular line and the Brovi Plus line together to bring the best of both worlds into one ink cup. Generally, my ratio is about 75% plus line and 25% regular line. I like this ratio because I like the warmth from the Brovi Plus line and I like the strength from the Brovi regular line. I always add in a little bit of warmth. Actually, I shouldn't say always. I don't like to be so black and white. Majority of the time, I'm adding in warmth because I like a warmer tone on the client. I'm also adding in warmth because these are mainly organic inks and they do cool when they heal and they cool over time. Everything cools when it heals, but this ink will cool over time. So I just add a drop or two, sometimes 3 for my darker colors on my cool toned clients. So Brovi Plus line and Brovi regular line mixed in the same ink cup. Majority of the time, this is what I am doing. We'll go over ratios in a bit. I will do a little bit of demonstration with some ink cups so you guys can kind of see what that looks like. Now, if my client has thin, dry, mature skin, then I'm likely not going to use any of the regular line. Why? Because the regular line is really strong. My clients with thin, dry, mature skin, their skin already is thin and it holds ink really well, so I don't worry about their retention rate. I already know whatever I put into the skin is probably going to stay in the skin. I actually like working on my mature skin clients for this very reason. Whatever I put there stays. My normal skinned clients, my oily skinned clients, my combination skin clients, my younger clients, pretty much everybody else, I'm comfortable with mixing 75% plus line, 25% regular line into my ink cup, and I kind of get the best of both worlds. To dilute or not to dilute. Now, a rule of thumb is that if you want that color lighter, then you just add some dilution to it. Brovi is the only line that I've ever diluted to date. The regular line is designed to be diluted. You have to dilute it because it's quite strong. If you don't dilute it and you put it into the skin, then the ink is so concentrated, you're gonna get a really kind of cool, ashy, not very attractive stroke. So the regular line is designed to be diluted. We diluted about 10 to 20, maybe even 30% depending on the skin type. If your client has that really dry, thin, mature skin, maybe you're gonna wanna dilute it 30-ish%. If you're using the regular line on somebody like myself, oily skin, maybe I'm a bit younger, then maybe we dilute it like 10 to 20%. The plus line doesn't necessarily have to be diluted, but most of the time I still do. When I dilute it though, I'm not diluting it 20 to 30%. I'm diluting it maybe 5 to 10%. There are cases though where I feel comfortable not diluting the plus line because I have experience with putting it into the skin. I know what it's going to look like when it heals. I know what it's going to look like when it ages, and I'm very confident working on all skin types because I have a really good understanding of how that client is going to heal. It is not a bad idea to dilute in the beginning because this ink line is strong. So maybe we dilute it a little bit more just to kind of play around with it until you get comfortable. So I'm diluting the regular line always, and depending on my client's skin type, maybe I'll dilute it a little more, maybe I'll dilute it a little less. The plus line, there are times where I do dilute it and there are times where I don't dilute it. If I dilute it, I'm diluting it about 5 to 10%, just a drop or two. If I don't do it, it's because I'm confident how it's going to heal in that client's skin because I've had plenty of experience with this ink. I know what it looks like healed. I know what it looks like as it ages. I know how this client's skin is going to react to it when I don't dilute. The Brovi One line does not need to be diluted. Again, the Brovi line and the Brovi Plus line are the only lines in my entire career that I've ever diluted. I've never diluted an inorganic line because inorganic inks already go into the skin a little bit slower. Inorganic inks already have a little bit less retention during the healing process than organic inks. If I dilute it, I'm only kind of making my job harder. I want to get into the skin as quickly as possible, saturate the stroke to my liking. I'm creating less trauma. I'm not hanging out in that area very long. So the faster I can get in and out, the better for you and the better for your client. What I recommend you start with. So again, if you're microblading or you're doing a very heavily powder brow saturated look, use the Brovi One line. That'll get the job done. If you're doing an airier style of nano, I'm gonna recommend that you start with the Plus line. Why? Because the Plus line is just easier to use. There's 5 colors. They're very simple to use. They're very easy to use. It's not overly complicated. And with all 5 of those colors, you'll be able to work on each and every client. So we'll go over some of the Brovi One inks that I would recommend. The Plus line is super easy. I recommend you get all of them because there's only 5 colors. With the regular line, there's many colors. We can discuss all of those, but I will also walk you through the top ones that I use most frequently. I'm gonna start with the Brovi Plus line because it's the one that I use the most and it's the easiest to use, and I feel it's the best one of all of them. The Plus line has 5 colors: Gray Harbor, Ripe Wheat, Freckle, and Roasted Chestnut. Of the 5 colors, the color that I use the least is Gray Harbor. Gray Harbor sounds like a weird name. I know it's not actually gray. It just has a yellow undertone, so it's going to give you a cooler effect when it heals, which is something that I'm not really looking for. I do have it at the studio just in case I get gray-haired client who's also maybe got some gray eyebrows and maybe they're looking for a cooler eyebrow. That would be the only time that I feel I would personally use that ink. Ripe Wheat, Freckle, Roasted Chestnut, and Bitter Chocolate are my go-tos. I love these colors so much. The colors are pretty self-explanatory. Ripe Wheat is your Fits 1, maybe 2 color. It is a ripe, goldeny, warm, blondie color, and it's absolutely perfection. Freckle is the next color after that. It's a little bit darker, and it's kind of the color of a freckle. I would say Freckle is almost my medium brown go-to. I am consistently pulling from Freckle and I'm very fond of this color. Roasted Chestnut is the color after Freckle and it's a little bit darker. This is something we would use on our darker eyebrow haired clients, maybe somebody like myself or darker. And then you have Bitter Chocolate, which is the darkest color in the collection. It's rich and dark and beautiful. Ripe Wheat, Freckle, Roasted Chestnut, and Bitter Chocolate all have warmer undertones, but remember, the darker the color, the more black. It just makes sense, right? To get that color darker, you have to add more black into the ink color. When we add more black into the ink color, we are going to get a cooler and cooler effect. So my colors like Roasted Chestnut and Bitter Chocolate, I am pretty much always adding some warmth into it. And when I say warmth, I mean warmth. Brovi has correction colors and there's a color that they call orange, but it looks very red. And I will add a couple of drops of this into my ink cup, give it a good mix. And this just helps the color look warmer during the healing process or after the healing process and as the clients age. So you can't really go wrong with the Plus line because it can be used for powder brows and it can be used for airier nano hair strokes, not recommended for microblading. From the Brovi regular line, a couple just off the top of my head go-tos would be Cinnamon Sticks. Cinnamon Sticks is a warmer, lighter, Fits 1, Fits 2 color. It has a lot of warmth, it's very strong, it's very beautiful, it's a go-to. Remember, in my career right now, I'm not really using the regular line only. I'm adding the Plus line into it. So a color combination that I feel like I would think of right off the top of my head that I would use Cinnamon Sticks with it would be maybe Ripe Wheat or a little bit of Freckle from the Plus line. After Cinnamon Sticks, I love pulling from Flat White. Flat White is a good medium dark brown with a lot of warmth. I have loved this color since day one. It's a beautiful, beautiful color. I feel like I frequently mix Freckle or Roasted Chestnut from the Plus line. That is a beautiful color combination. After Flat White from the regular line, I like to use Roasted Chestnut and Bitter Chocolate from the regular line as well. While they have the same name as the Plus line, they do not look the same in the bottle, just to be clear. Roasted Chestnut from the regular line is a bit darker than Flat White. Side note, I always thought Flat White was like a very odd name until I realized that there is a coffee called flat white. And then that made a whole bunch more sense. So roasted chestnut and then bitter chocolate are my next go-tos from the regular line. Roasted chestnut is darker than flat white and bitter chocolate is darker than roasted chestnut, just depending on what I'm trying to do and how dark your client's natural eyebrow hair is. You're going to want to pull a darker color for darker eyebrow hairs to match as seamlessly as possible. Those are kind of my go-tos from the regular line. Now, my go-tos from the Brovi One line are light brown. This is kind of my first lighter color go-to color. It's just a beautiful light brown color. After that, I actually like light auburn. It's a light auburny brown color, but it has a lot of warmth. And I like this color because Brovi One is considered their inorganic line, but it still has a little bit of carbon. We don't want a whole bunch of carbon because we know how that ages when put into the skin too deep or heavily saturated or misused, but we need a little bit of carbon to get the color dark and for some extra staying power. So I like having some warmth in the Brovi One colors, which is why I like light auburn. After that, my next probably most go-to color from Brovi One is warm dark brown. It's very simple, very self-explanatory. And then the darkest color is deep dark brown. All of them have a warm undertone, and those four from the Brovi One line are my go-tos. Years ago, when I first got into the industry, my kit only included about 5 colors. I appreciate how simple they made it for me. Color theory should not be overcomplicated. Me personally, I do not believe that you need 10 different colors from one line. Do I think that you need a couple different lines or multiple different lines? Yes, I do. Not because of the colors, but because many of us offer different techniques. Also, many of us have a million different skin types that come into our studio, and each client has a little bit different of a skin type, and each client has a different need. For example, if you're doing nano hair strokes, some people have great brow hair in the front of the brow. And then at the tail of the brow, they don't have very much at all. So our job as the artist is to overcompensate and create the illusion that there are more hair strokes or an even amount of hair stroke in the back of the brow in the tail area. So you can't really do an airy hair stroke to make it blend seamlessly with all of the brow hair that they do have in the front. If you did an airy hair stroke, when the client comes back healed, it's probably going to look too light because you didn't build up the saturation to counterbalance the amount of brow hair that they do have in the front of their brow. So in a case like this, I would want to heavily saturate these hair strokes. That means I can't use a mainly organic line like the regular line or the plus line. I'm then going to pull from the Brovi One line so I can heavily saturate these hair strokes and not worry about what they are going to look like ethically years down the road, because they will fade out a little bit and they won't blur into a dark gray blob. But if your client doesn't have much brow hair, or it's sparse, but it's evenly sparse throughout the entire brow, I don't have to overcompensate in specific areas, so then I can create airy hair strokes throughout the entire brow. What if my client turned 18, because in Washington State you have to be 18 for me to tattoo you. What if they turned 18 and on their 18th birthday they wanted to come get their eyebrows done? It's highly, highly likely that I'm only going to pull from a mainly inorganic ink because I do want these brows to fade away. She's 18 years old. She has 40 more years left of permanent makeup life left in front of her. I want to be able to change the brow, to shift the brow. I don't want stuff to blur together and then she's going to end up with a powder brow later down the road. I want to ethically take care of this client by putting inorganic ink into her skin. Versus a client who's 86, she doesn't have as much permanent makeup life left in front of her, so I'm absolutely going to put in a mainly organic ink into her skin so her brows last for the remainder of her life. Now, if that 86-year-old client had great brow hair in the front and no tail hair, then that might be a case where I do take an inorganic line and heavily saturate the strokes in the tail of the brow so I can overcompensate and create the illusion that all of the brow has good, dark, dense eyebrow hair. So just in those 3 or 4 examples I gave you, I needed all 3 of these lines. My average client is about 45 to 65 years old. I'm kind of known for having mature skinned clients. I'm kind of known for working on more difficult skin types. Most of the time, I am working with the Brovi Plus line and the Brovi regular line, mixing it together at about 75% plus line and 25% regular line. Send them home, let them heal. Let's say they come to their touch-up, their 6 to 8 week touch-up. They healed great. Everything looks beautiful, but your client wants them darker. Now what do? I'm certainly not going to continue to layer and pack in organic ink for this client. At that point, I will then move them over to the Brovi One line and heavily saturate the hair strokes so they can get the brow that they're looking for, and it is going to age ethically. Let's mix up some color combinations that I use frequently, or I'll point out some color combinations that I use frequently. I'll also show you in my ink cup how I mix it, because ink cups vary from manufacturer to manufacturer. Some smalls from one manufacturer are a medium from another manufacturer. So let's just take a look at that, and hopefully we can get you all confident enough to use Brovi. So confident that you have all 3 lines at your studio and you know when to pull them and why. I have the entire regular line from Brovi here, and then I have the entire Plus line from Brovi. From the entire regular line, we have Cinnamon Sticks, Gray Harbor, Ripe Wheat, Freckle, Roasted Chestnut, Flat White, Bitter Chocolate, and Pepsi Cola. Pepsi Cola is technically the darkest color from the regular line. I've never had a problem getting this line dark enough. I'm really surprised when I have artists tell me that Bitter Chocolate is too light. It's not getting the client's brows dark enough. I am surprised by that, but hey, it is what it is. So then you would go to the next darkest color, the final darkest color, which is going to be Pepsi Cola. Beautiful colors from the Brovi One line: warm light brown, cool light brown, light auburn, cool dark brown, warm dark brown, and deep dark brown. These are the tones and colors of the ink. They're all pretty warm. I see one maybe here that's a little greenish. This one is, yep, cool dark brown. They're all very, very pretty though. Picking a color for microblading a super heavy powder brow or nano hair strokes that look like microblading is actually quite easy. The stroke is fully saturated. Fully saturated. So all you're going to do is likely choose a warm based undertoned ink and then pick it as close to the natural brow hair as possible, because the one line is designed for full saturation like microblading. Their lightest color looks very light in tone. This is warm light brown. This is the lightest color from this collection versus the lightest color from the Plus line is this. Can we see the giant difference of the two? And the reason why there's a giant difference is because this stroke is going to be fully saturated. This stroke isn't. We're going to control the color our client gets, not only by the color that we pick, but by the amount of saturation we put into the skin. Because we're not controlling the saturation with this one, it's just 100% saturation. This is the color that we're going to get. But when we put 50 to 75% saturation of this color in, we start to get a color kind of like this. Inorganic inks do go into the skin a little bit slower, but it's an easier technique because we're just pulling through the skin really, really slowly. We're just saturating that stroke 100%. So there's not a lot of guesswork with the saturation. With this, the appointments take longer for me because I am starting off with a lighter amount of saturation. I'm building color, building color, building color until I like it. Versus when I tattoo with this, it's just a one and done type situation. I'm just pulling the stroke slowly, moving through the skin slowly, and saturating the stroke 100%. There's no guesswork. I'm gonna suggest some color combinations here. That way we don't have to waste and mix up a whole bunch of color, but I will also demonstrate that on video. So let's talk about some clients. I'm going to say this is our client here. She does have some previous work. She has blonde hair, blue eyes, but her brow hair isn't like a blonde color. It's like a light medium brown color. So for her, you could do, her skin type is also quite dry. For her, you could do ripe wheat or freckle from the Plus line, and that would be perfect. If you wanted a little bit more va-va-voom into the ink, you could do ripe wheat or freckle mixed with, I would say, a little bit of cinnamon sticks or a little bit of, I don't really care for Gray Harbor, ripe wheat. This was my model that I did in front of the masterclass. It is also a cover up. This is her after her touch up. Her healed result was this. They healed beautifully. You're probably not going to be able to catch that on camera, but they healed perfection. She had old red work underneath, and they healed just beautifully. So let's just look at her client profile. She has flawless skin, blue eyes, and medium brown hair. She's my best friend of 17 years. I know her client profile like the back of my hand. She wants a more va-va-voom brow. So she healed great at her first session, but then she wanted them darker. So now, if I lay organic ink over what I've already got, and I pack it in and send her on her way, I've just done a complete disservice to my best friend, and then I'm gonna have to look at them for the rest of my life. And they're going to blur together, look cool, dark, gray, and like a blob. She might not notice, but I absolutely would and will. So for her 6 to 8 week touch-up, I use mainly inorganic ink because she requested a darker brow. I ethically cannot saturate her hair strokes fully with an organic ink. So I went ahead and chose a color like deep dark brown, my darkest one, and packed it into her skin because I know what it's going to look like 2 and 3 years down the road. I know it's going to have some fade out, and I know it's going to fade out ethically. Next client, she is, I believe, half Hispanic and then half white. She has a natural look to her. She doesn't wear a lot of makeup. She's requesting a natural brow, and for her, she is, I want to say she's in her early 50s, late 40s, pretty skin, not overly dry, not overly thick, not overly oily, and there's a lot we could do with her. Let's check out the starting point of her brow. The starting point of her brow, let's see if we can find a before picture. Oh, you know what? This was healed at her touch-up. So this is healed at her touch-up. She had a touch of makeup on her brows, which tells me she wants to go a little bit darker. So this is what they looked like after I wiped them off. She healed really great. And I already know what color combination I used on her. For her, my go-to is bitter chocolate from the Plus line with a couple drops of warmth and maybe 1 drop of dilution. If you want a little va-va-voom, a little extra staying power, you could add maybe 25% roasted chestnut or 25% bitter chocolate. I don't know if I would use the Pepsi Cola, but this is just a personal preference. This is something that this is a color that I don't really pull from very often. I know a lot of people like it because they say that it's nice and dark. But for her, bitter chocolate from the Plus line, couple drops of warmth, 1 or 2 drops of dilution. Boom, there you go, she healed beautifully. All right, here is a great example of when we're going to have to use an inorganic ink. This client came to me with previous work. There's a little red undertone in the tail area. She has amazing brow hair from the front to the tail, and she's lacking her tail. Now, I can't go in and put in airy hair strokes in the tail and have her be happy when she's healed, because it'll just be too light. So what I did was packed in one of my deepest, darkest inorganic colors into her strokes, and then when she heals, it will counterbalance the front. So for a client like this, I'm gonna pull from deep dark brown, which is the darkest color, from the Brovi One line, and it will fade out ethically, and I won't have to worry about a blobby, blurry, cool, dark eyebrow years down the road. All right, here is another great example of when you're going to need to use inorganic ink. This beautiful client right here has great brow hair in the front of her brow, but she's lacking in the tail. So if I just go do airy hair strokes back here, she's not gonna be happy when she's healed. So she has dark features, dark hair, dark brows. I believe she's actually half or a quarter black. She's just stunning, super exotic looking. She does have light eyes, but look at how dark that brow hair is. So this is a case where I'm going to take, again, deep dark brown and fully saturate those hair strokes to make sure that client is happy when she's healed. My camera didn't pick up great after photos. Sometimes the new camera blurs when I zoom in. See how it looks blurry right there? But anyway, I went in back here and fully saturated those hair strokes, so she will be happy and it will look balanced when she's healed. Here is a video of her. All right, these are the 3 Brovi lines we have. We have the Brovi One line, the Brovi Plus line, and the Brovi regular line. Remember, the Brovi regular line was the first line that came out, and then they came out with the Plus line, and now they have their inorganic Brovi One line. They also have correction colors, yellow, red, and green. They're not here right now just because I don't really pull from them a lot. It's mainly this guy right here. Sometimes a little bit of yellow, okay? Now, I have ink cups that I want to show you guys because it's all very different from manufacturer to manufacturer. These are the ink cups that I use. We have large, medium, and small. I bet the medium and small look very similar, but they are not. If I hold them like this, you might be able to tell the difference. This one is the medium and this one is the small. I like to use the medium one for lip blushing because I use a little bit more ink for that procedure. A small won't get me through the entire procedure, but if I'm doing a lip blushing procedure, I don't want to use the big one because I'm gonna waste so much ink. I would rather have a little bit too less of ink, work on my client, realize I'm low, de-glove, go get a little bit more ink, put new gloves back on, and then continue my procedure, then waste my ink because these bottles are expensive. This is probably your most expensive product used during your procedure. So I just want to be very clear that this is the small little ink cup that I use. It's called a small, but when I ordered these guys, they were also called a small. So I hope we can see on camera the difference between the two. Now, I'm mixing in a small ink cup only. My ink cups are now placed on my popsicle stick, just like I would be working on a real life client. And then of course I have to have my disposable mascara wand because I use the end of this guy to mix up my ink while it's in the ink cup. So let's say this client here is a Fitz 2. She has light skin, blue eyes, and medium brown brow hair, medium dark brown brow hair and like medium light brown hair. You can all kind of gauge that client. Let's say this client is 40 years old. She has normal skin and her brow is sparse, but it's evenly sparse. We're not trying to overcompensate in any areas. For that client, I'm thinking freckle, or you could use ripe wheat. Ripe wheat is a little lighter. It might be a little light when it heals. Ripe wheat is kind of for your Fits ones, maybe your Fits 2 client who's looking for maybe she's nervous or she's scared or she wants a really light brow, but usually Fits 1 is going to be ripe wheat. So my Fits 2 with blue eyes, light skin, but a medium brown brow hair or medium brown hair on the head, I'm thinking freckle with a little bit of flat white. Okay, so this is gonna be the color combination that I'm going to use. The plus line heals warmer, the regular line heals cooler. Because I'm gonna use about 25% of the regular line, I'm going to add warmth. And I do, again, a ratio of about 75% plus line, 25% regular line. So what that looks like in my cup looks like this. We're gonna make sure we mix our inks. I'm gonna start with putting the plus line in my ink cup. All right, that was about 10 drops. 5 drops, flat white. Then I'm gonna do 2 drops of this warmth. And that also kind of counts as a dilution. You're diluting this color already. Now I would do 3 drops, maybe 4 of dilution. Let's do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you see how my ink cup is kind of bubbling over? I don't know how well you can see that on camera, but it's not flush with the rim. It is bubbling over, and that's pretty much what it looks like 99% of my clientele. And then I take the back end of my disposable mascara wand and I lightly mix it first, kind of in a circle up and down motion. And then once I feel like I've got a good start to the mix, I pounce up and down. And I'm pouncing up and down and rotating a little bit at the same time. And I do that for a while. And then sometimes I'll ring the top like this just to mix anything from the top, because it is bubbling over my ink cup. All right, and then I kind of rub any excess off of the back of my mascara wand, and that will get me through an entire nano procedure. So let's mix up a color for let's say it's a Hispanic client. I am going to probably lean towards either roasted chestnut or bitter chocolate from the plus line, and then very likely I would do bitter chocolate from the regular line. Again, 75% 25% ratio. I'm gonna start by giving it a good mix. I'll start with my plus line. I did 10 drops of that one. Bitter chocolate from the regular line. 1, 2, 3. And this one is a darker color combination. So we're going to add 3 drops of warmth. 1, 2, 3. And then I'm gonna try to get 2 or 3 drops of dilution in here. 1, 2, 3. Woo! I just barely made it. It is bubbling over like all of my other ink cups do. So I'm going to slowly mix it first. Okay, I've got most of that mixed. Now I'll start pouncing, and then I'll pounce and twist at the same time, or pounce and, I don't know, mix, spin. I also like to mix my ink in between passes. I feel like maybe some of it settles. I don't know. I'm just weird about that. I like to give it a little mix in between passes. All right. Wipe the excess off, and there you go. That will get me through a whole procedure of nano. Just remember, permanent makeup really isn't black and white. There are no hard yeses, hard no's, hard that's correct, that's incorrect. There's a lot of gray area. How I mix colors and how you mix colors might be different, and that doesn't make it wrong, it just makes it different. So keep that in mind. I hope that you guys get the regular line, the plus line, and the one line because I love them so much. If you've been following me for a little while, I don't talk about things that I don't use or love, and I certainly wouldn't sell it on my website if I didn't stand behind Brovi INK. I love it that much. I'm telling you, from the first time I got it into my hand, I just knew there was something special about the ink, and that was just the regular line. It's only become better and better. So I hope this video was helpful. I feel like everybody says that at the end of the video, but it's actually true. I hope this video was helpful. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Hit me up on social media. Find me on Instagram or Facebook, or shoot me an email at info@laurentaylor.ink, INK, not INC. Have a good day. See you all later. What do they do? It's like an outro.